Australia is now officially in a deep recession for the first time in over 30 years. Inflation is out of control, interest rates have skyrocketed, and millions of Aussies are struggling to keep up. But here's the thing. This crash didn't happen overnight. It's been brewing quietly, while most of us were too busy juggling rising grocery bills, soaring rents, and shrinking paychecks. So what really went wrong? Why is the so-called lucky country suddenly feeling anything but lucky? And most importantly, what happens next? In this video, we're breaking down the 10 hidden reasons behind Australia's economic collapse. Some of them might shock you, some might make you angry, but all of them affect your money, your job, and your future. So stay with us, because understanding what's really going on could help you survive this recession, and maybe even come out stronger on the other side. Number 10. Government spending cuts. When times get tough, governments often tighten their belts, and that's exactly what's happening in Australia right now. In the face of rising national debt and inflationary pressure, both federal and state governments have started cutting back on public spending. On the surface, it might sound like a responsible move, but in reality, it's adding even more pressure to an already fragile economy. Think about it. Public spending fuels jobs, infrastructure, and growth. When the government funds projects like new roads, schools, hospitals, and renewable energy, it creates thousands of jobs and injects money directly into the economy. But with recent budget cuts, many of those projects are now being delayed, downsized, or scrapped entirely. This means fewer contracts for businesses, job losses in construction and public services, and less money circulating through local communities. Entire sectors that rely on government funding, like aged care, education, and public transport, are feeling the squeeze. For everyday Australians, this might look like longer hospital wait times, crowded classrooms, and cancelled upgrades to local infrastructure. Even worse, these spending cuts are happening at the exact moment when people need support the most. With the cost of living rising and wages barely moving, Aussies are turning to government services to help them cope, but finding those services underfunded and overstretched. Some economists argue that this kind of fiscal tightening in the middle of a downturn can actually make the recession deeper and longer. It's like trying to save water while your house is on fire. Yes, long-term debt matters, but so does stabilizing the economy right now. So while government cuts might balance the books on paper, the real cost is being felt on the ground by workers, families, and communities who are already doing it tough. Number 9. Falling consumer confidence. When people lose confidence in the economy, they stop spending, and that's exactly what's happening across Australia right now. Consumer confidence has plummeted to its lowest levels in years, and it's not hard to see why. Mortgage repayments are eating up paychecks, groceries cost more than ever, and job security feels shakier by the day. The result? Australians are tightening their wallets and bracing for the worst. But here's the problem: consumer spending drives the economy. When people stop buying new clothes, cancelling dinner plans, or putting off big purchases like cars and appliances, businesses suffer. Sales drop, profits fall. And in response, companies cut back on staff, on hours, and on investment. It's a vicious cycle, and right now, we're deep in it. You can feel it everywhere, from empty restaurants and half-full shopping centres to local businesses offering constant sales just to stay afloat. Even online shopping, which boomed during the pandemic, has started to slow. People are holding on to their money, not because they want to, but because they feel like they have to. And it's not just the working class feeling the fear. Middle income and even high income households are pulling back too. Many are stashing cash just in case, afraid of layoffs or future rate hikes. According to recent surveys, a growing number of Australians believe now is a bad time to buy major household items, and fewer believe their financial situation will improve in the next 12 months. The scary part? This mindset can prolong a recession. When fear drives behaviour, the economy slows down even further. What begins as a psychological response ends up becoming a very real economic downturn. In short, falling consumer confidence isn't just a symptom of recession, it's one of the biggest forces keeping it alive. Number 8. Population slowdown migration challenges. Australia's economy has long relied on steady population growth to fuel demand, expand the workforce, and support industries like construction, education, and retail. But now, that growth is slowing down, and it's creating ripple effects across the entire economy. In recent years, migration numbers have dropped dramatically, largely due to tighter immigration policies, international instability, and a post-pandemic backlog that's still being felt. Add to that a declining birth rate and an aging population, and suddenly, Australia finds itself with fewer young workers, and fewer consumers. Why does this matter? Because when there are fewer people, there's less demand for housing, goods, and services. Fewer students enrolling in universities, fewer renters looking for homes, fewer workers filling key jobs in healthcare, hospitality, and construction. That drop in demand leads to slower economic growth, and in some regions, especially rural and outer suburbs, it's starting to feel like a slow fade. Businesses that once thrived on migration, language schools, property developers, transport services are now struggling. Rental vacancies may still be low, but that's largely due to supply issues, not surging demand. Meanwhile, skilled labour shortages continue to hit industries hard because we simply aren't attracting enough migrants to fill critical gaps in the workforce. The government has announced plans to boost skilled migration, but progress is slow and red tape remains a major barrier. In the meantime, local economies, especially in smaller cities and towns, are feeling the pressure. Long story short, less migration means less momentum. Without fresh talent, new ideas, and growing communities, the economy loses one of its key drivers. And in a recession, that's a major problem, because when the population stalls, so does the energy behind recovery, innovation, and growth. Number 7. Decline in global demand. Australia's economy is deeply tied to the global market, especially through exports like iron ore, coal, natural gas, agriculture, and education. For decades, strong demand from international buyers, particularly China, India, and Southeast Asia, has helped keep the economy humming. But now, that demand is drying up, and it's hitting Australia hard. The world is facing its own economic challenges. China's post-pandemic recovery has been slower than expected, with lower factory output, weak consumer spending, and a troubled property market. Since China is Australia's biggest trading partner, any slowdown there means fewer exports, less income, and shrinking tax revenue for Australia. At the same time, other countries are also pulling back, reducing their reliance on imported resources due to rising costs and shifting energy policies. Key export industries are feeling the strain. Mining companies are reporting falling profits as commodity prices dip. Farmers are seeing reduced orders for grain and meat as global food inflation pushes buyers to cheaper alternatives. And Australia's once booming international education sector is still recovering, with fewer overseas students arriving due to visa issues and rising living costs. It's not just big corporations that feel the impact. Regional towns and port cities that rely on trade-related jobs are seeing layoffs, slower business, and reduced investment. When fewer ships leave our shores loaded with goods, there's a domino effect: less shipping work, fewer warehouse jobs, and less spending in local economies. Australia's economy has always benefited from being globally connected, but in times like these, that connection becomes a vulnerability. When global demand weakens, we earn less, grow slower, and face bigger challenges getting back on our feet. In short, the world isn't buying like it used to, and Australia is paying the price. Number 6. Housing market turmoil. For many Australians, owning a home has always been the great dream, but right now that dream is starting to crack under pressure. After years of skyrocketing prices, the housing market is now facing a perfect storm of falling values, rising interest rates, and buyer uncertainty, creating one of the most turbulent periods in recent memory. When the Reserve Bank began aggressively raising interest rates to control inflation, mortgage repayments shot up almost overnight. Suddenly, thousands of homeowners found themselves paying hundreds, if not thousands, more every month just to keep their homes. Some are barely holding on. Others are being forced to sell, often at a loss. This has led to a noticeable dip in home values across many cities. While some areas have stabilized slightly, the overall market remains fragile. New buyers are hesitant to enter, fearful that prices could fall further. At the same time, banks are tightening lending standards, making it harder for first-home buyers and investors to get approved. Then there's the growing problem of mortgage prisoners, homeowners stuck with high-interest loans they can't refinance because their property value has dropped below what they owe. They can't move, can't sell, and can't get a better deal. They're trapped. The ripple effect is massive. Construction has slowed, with developers delaying or cancelling projects due to reduced demand and soaring material costs. This not only impacts housing supply but also kills jobs in building, plumbing, electrical work, and more. For renters, things aren't better. Vacancy rates are low and rents are climbing fast, but with fewer properties being built and more investors exiting the market, the pressure isn't easing anytime soon. In short, the housing market isn't just wobbling, it's a warning sign. And for millions of Australians, it's becoming clear that the dream of home ownership now comes with a dangerous price tag. Number 5. Collapse in business investment. In a healthy economy, businesses are constantly investing in their future, hiring new staff, upgrading equipment, expanding operations, and launching new products. But right now, in Australia, that confidence has taken a sharp dive. Across nearly every sector, we're seeing a major collapse in business investment, and it's playing a huge role in deepening the recession. Why is this happening? It comes down to one word: uncertainty. With interest rates rising, inflation still high, consumer spending dropping, and global demand shrinking, many business owners are simply too unsure about what lies ahead. Rather than risk their capital, they're cutting costs, shelving projects, and holding tight to whatever reserves they have left. You can see it clearly in construction. Commercial building approvals are down, major developments have been paused, and tradies are seeing fewer contracts come through. In retail, businesses are scaling back inventory and delaying store expansions. In tech and innovation, startups are finding it almost impossible to raise funding, and larger companies are freezing hiring or making layoffs. This slowdown isn't just affecting big corporations, it's hitting small and medium-sized businesses the hardest. These are the local cafes, manufacturers, salons, and service providers that make up the backbone of Australia's economy. Without the ability or the confidence to invest, they're forced to cut staff, reduce hours, or shut their doors altogether. The long-term risk? A lack of business investment today means fewer jobs, less innovation, and slower economic recovery tomorrow. Without growth from the private sector, the economy becomes dangerously reliant on consumer spending, which, as we've seen, is already collapsing. In short, when businesses stop investing, it signals something deeper. They've lost faith in the tientes, a future. And that's one of the clearest signs that this recession isn't just a bump in the road, it's a major turning point. Number 4, massive consumer debt. Australia is one of the most indebted nations in the world, not because of government spending, but because of ordinary households. The average Australian carries more personal debt than most people in other developed countries, and now that burden is starting to crush the economy. With interest rates soaring and the cost of living exploding, what used to be manageable debt has turned into a financial time bomb. Much of this debt is tied up in mortgages, which ballooned during the housing boom of the past decade. People borrowed more than ever to get into the property market, often at ultra-low interest rates. But now, with the RBA hiking rates at record speed, monthly repayments have doubled or even tripled for many households. Then there's credit card debt, personal loans, and buy now pay later schemes, all of which are surging. As wages stagnate and prices rise, more Australians are relying on debt just to cover basic expenses like groceries, fuel, and utility bills. According to recent data, over 40% of households are now spending more than they earn, and many are dipping into savings or going into the red to stay afloat. The problem with this level of debt is that it kills spending power. When people are funneling most of their income into repayments, they're not shopping, dining out, or investing in their future. That has a chilling effect on the entire economy. It also increases the risk of defaults and bankruptcies, which can further destabilize banks and housing markets. In a recession, high consumer debt acts like an anchor. It drags everything down. And without real wage growth or relief from interest rates, millions of Australians are now stuck in a cycle of debt that's becoming harder to escape. The result? A fragile economy sitting on a pile of unpayable promises. Number 3, wage growth stagnation. While the cost of living in Australia has surged to record highs, wages have barely moved, and that imbalance is choking the economy. For years now, Australian workers have been told that wage growth is just around the corner. But despite rising productivity and growing corporate profits, real wages, the income you actually feel in your pocket, have remained stagnant or even declined when adjusted for inflation. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, real wages have fallen for 5 consecutive quarters, meaning that even if you got a small raise, you're still worse off because everything else is getting more expensive. This creates a serious problem. People are working just as hard, if not harder, but can afford less than they did just a few years ago. For the average household, that means cutting back. No more spontaneous weekends away, no upgrades to the car, fewer dinners out, and putting off even basic purchases like school uniforms or appliance repairs. Across the board, Australians are spending less, not because they want to, but because they have to. This lack of wage growth doesn't just affect individuals, it weakens the entire economy. When people aren't earning enough, they aren't spending enough. And when they aren't spending, businesses struggle, profits fall, and jobs are cut. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. Low wages lead to low demand, which leads to slower growth and even fewer opportunities for pay rises. What makes it worse is that some industries, especially in healthcare, education, and the public sector, are still facing labor shortages, yet wage offers remain stagnant. It's a disconnect that leaves workers frustrated and the economy vulnerable. In short, wage stagnation isn't just unfair, it's unsustainable. Without meaningful increases in income, Australian households can't support the economy, and the recession only deepens from here. Number 2. Cost of living crisis. Right now, millions of Australians are waking up each day wondering how they're going to pay for the basics: food, rent, petrol, electricity. The cost of living crisis has become the most immediate and painful sign of Australia's deepening recession, and it's hitting households harder than at any time in recent history. Grocery prices have surged across the board, with everyday items like bread, milk, fruit, and meat seeing double-digit price increases in the past year. Filling up the tank now costs $100 or more, and energy bills are shocking families who are already stretched thin. Meanwhile, rents are climbing fast, especially in cities where supply can't keep up. For many, the choice is now between paying the rent or skipping meals. This isn't just about prices going up, it's about wages not keeping pace. When your income stays the same but your expenses explode, the financial pressure becomes unbearable. Families are cancelling health insurance, delaying medical appointments, cutting kids' extracurriculars, and leaning heavily on credit just to stay afloat. And the crisis isn't just affecting low-income earners anymore. Middle-class Australians, teachers, nurses, small business owners are now facing the same tough decisions. The squeeze is everywhere. People who once felt financially secure are suddenly unsure how they'll cover the next bill. Businesses are also feeling the pinch, with consumers spending less on non-essentials. Retailers, cafes, service providers, and even tradespeople are watching their incomes shrink. It's a chain reaction that ripples through the economy. Less spending leads to less income, which leads to job cuts, which leads to even less spending. In short, the cost of living crisis isn't just a temporary spike in prices, it's a system-wide stress fracture. And unless wages, supply chains, and energy markets adjust fast, it's a crisis that could keep dragging Australia deeper into recession. Number 1. Skyrocketing interest rates. If there's one factor that's hitting Australians the hardest right now, it's skyrocketing interest rates. What began as a slow rise to combat inflation has turned into a relentless wave of rate hikes that are now shaking the very foundation of household budgets. The Reserve Bank of Australia has lifted the cash rate multiple times in rapid succession, taking it from historic lows to levels not seen in over a decade. And the consequences have been brutal. For homeowners, this means mortgage repayments have soared. A typical household with a $600,000 mortgage is now paying thousands more each year just to keep their home. Fixed-rate borrowers are facing the dreaded mortgage cliff, where their ultra-low rates expire and suddenly jump overnight, sometimes by more than 3 or 4 percentage points. It's a shock that many simply weren't prepared for. But the impact goes beyond mortgages. Credit card debt, personal loans, and business financing have all become more expensive. For renters, landlords are passing on the higher interest costs through rising rents. Even small businesses, already struggling with lower sales and higher costs, are being squeezed by pricier loans, making it harder to invest, expand, or even stay afloat. The problem is that while interest rates are rising fast, wages aren't. So Australians are being forced to cut spending, cancel plans, and in some cases sell off assets just to survive. The ripple effect on the economy is enormous. Less consumer spending, slower business activity, more financial stress, and rising defaults. Skyrocketing interest rates were meant to cool inflation, but instead, they've frozen household budgets and accelerated the path into recession. And the worst part? Many economists believe the full impact hasn't even hit yet. For millions of Aussies, the interest rate hikes feel less like a solution and more like a wrecking ball. Australia's deep recession isn't the result of one bad decision or a single global shock. It's the outcome of multiple crises colliding at once. From skyrocketing interest rates and crippling consumer debt to stagnant wages, a collapsing housing market, and shrinking global demand, every piece of the puzzle is connected. And unfortunately, they're all pointing in the same direction: economic pain that's far from over. But here's the truth: most headlines don't say. Recessions aren't just statistics. They're deeply personal. They show up in your grocery bill, your rent, your job security, and your ability to sleep at night. That's why understanding what's happening isn't just helpful, it's essential. Because when you understand the why, you're better prepared to navigate the what now. So what can you do? Start by tightening your finances, avoiding unnecessary debt, and focusing on building up savings, even if it's just a little at a time. Stay informed, stay flexible, and most importantly, don't panic. Recessions don't last forever, but the smart moves you make now can protect your future. If this video helped you understand Australia's economic downturn more clearly, give it a thumbs up. It helps more people see this content. Subscribe for weekly, research-backed breakdowns of the financial world, explained simply and without the fluff. And drop a comment below. How is the recession impacting you right now? What changes have you made to adapt? And if you want to take action today, check out our next video, 5 ways to recession-proof your finances. Practical steps you can start using right away. Stay smart, stay strong, and remember, knowledge is your greatest asset in times of uncertainty.